app tracking transparency has launched with iOS 14.5. So great news for everyone, but it's not going quite as it seemed. We thought it was going to be a big bang, but it's been more of a, let's say, a bit of a mess in terms of the approach. So here's a demo on me using iOS 14.5 with the app tracking transparency feature. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about Apple's app tracking transparency, which is a new privacy feature in iOS 14.5. So I'll show you how to use it and how to stop tracking altogether in your settings. So app tracking transparency works when you open an app and you have enabled a setting called allow apps to ask to track. So once I've gone through all these other notifications and permissions, it's come up. So for the sake of argument, I will allow the app to track. There we go. Now I'll go into my settings, tracking, and there is Foodie, which I've allowed to track. Luckily, I can actually turn this off. So as somebody who's interested in privacy, I wouldn't want to be tracked for the purposes of serving me targeted advertising. So I'll turn that off there. And actually in your settings, you can see this, allow apps to request to track. Now, what that means is you're allowed to get these pop-ups and they're allowed to ask to track you. And if you say yes, as I did just then they'll be allowed to track you across products. So when you're online or you're on another app, an app such as Facebook would be able to actually track you across those services using something called the identifier for advertisers. So if you'd like to turn that blanket off, you don't want those pop-ups coming every time, there you go. It's that easy. So you've made your iPhone much more private and apps are no longer allowed to track you.
You say it's been a bit of a mess, okay? I think it's been a damp squib and a real disappointment. As you know, I've been talking about it for days. We all expected it to be smooth and on rails, and suddenly we'd wake up, our phones would have updated, and we'd be getting pinged all these very simple alerts: allowed to track, don't allow to track. And instead, what we had is mostly nothing. And then when we were seeing some of these alerts, they were, in my view, watered down, which I was not expecting at all. So I'm sitting here thinking that was a little bit mismanaged from a messaging perspective.
Yeah, there's a few reasons for this. There's, first of all, because you might have had ask apps to track turned off in your settings, which meant that carried over to iOS 14.5. A lot of people haven't realized that. The other thing is that although developers should have been ready with their little signs of pop-ups saying ask to track in iOS 14.5, a lot of them aren't. For example, Facebook said in an interview that this would be rolling out to users over the coming weeks. So users are starting to see this pop-up come up. Thing is, the pop-ups don't look like we expected them to look either, do they? I mean, we expected it to literally be a really obvious question that was uniform. And it isn't. There are little persuasive things in there like, well, this is why the app should track you.
This is an absolute, it's so different from what we expected. It was really interesting because Apple put out a video on YouTube and then sent a press release and everyone knew it was out there and people were sharing it. And it was almost like a taunt from Tim Cook to Mark Zuckerberg saying, this is all about, it came across, this is all about Facebook and this is all about, why would you allow an organization to track? Maybe you want them to, you probably don't. We've brought this out. And then what we get are like splash screens with lots of explanations. And the thing that I find irritating about that is we know from cookies and the nonsensical explainers that get you to click yes when you go to a website, that if you just hit a user with a load of words, they just click yes to get it out of the way. That is not what this was supposed to be about.
This isn't the kind of big bang, this big change we were expecting. There isn't this transparency, is there?
Do we know if Apple are going to do anything about developers who try and persuade users not to stop them tracking? Is there anything in the pipeline?
Yeah. They're not supposed to try and persuade people. What the developers are supposed to do, and what is in the guidelines, is that people should be presented with the information they need to make an informed choice. So they should know what they're saying yes to. And this is actually part of regulation, privacy regulation, especially the GDPR that we have in Europe, is this informed choice. You know, you have to opt in to something and know what it's about. You shouldn't be tricked.